There is a wall of concrete sitting in central China right now, and it holds back so much water that the sheer weight of that water has physically slowed the rotation of the Earth. Not by much, just a tiny fraction of a second. But think about that for a moment. Something humans built changed Earth's rotation by an amount so tiny only scientific instruments can measure it. Its name is the Three Gorges Dam. It is the largest hydroelectric power station ever built. It submerged entire towns and villages beneath a vast reservoir. It forced more than 1 million people to leave their homes. It played a role in wiping out a river dolphin species that had lived in the Yangtze for millions of years, long before the first humans ever appeared. And it sits in a geologically active region while holding back a reservoir stretching nearly 600 kilometers upstream. China calls it the greatest engineering achievement of the modern era. Critics call it one of the most dangerous and destructive projects in history. They might both be right. Stay with me. This one will change how you see the world. Before this dam existed, the Yangtze River was a killer. The Yangtze is the third longest river on Earth. It cuts through the heart of China, through mountains, through deep gorges, through some of the most heavily populated land anywhere on the planet. Seasonal floods were a part of life there for centuries. And when the river turned violent, it did not just damage things, it destroyed them entirely. In the 20th century alone, floods along the Yangtze killed hundreds of thousands and possibly millions of people. In 1931, one catastrophic flood triggered famine and disease across huge parts of central China. Historians still argue over the true death toll. Some estimates are around 400,000, while others climb into the millions. What nobody argues about is the scale of what happened. Entire villages gone, crops destroyed, cities underwater. So the dream of taming the Yangtze was not a new idea. Chinese leaders had been talking about building a dam here for more than a century. The plan was straightforward in theory. Build something so enormous it could swallow a flood before it reached the people downstream. Capture the energy of the water and turn it into electricity. Transform a river that had been killing people for centuries into something that powered homes and factories instead. Wars interrupted it. Revolutions delayed it. Decades of argument nearly buried it for good. Then in 1994, the first concrete was poured, and one of the largest engineering projects in human history began. To understand how large this dam is, you have to stop thinking about dams the way you normally do. The Three Gorges Dam stretches nearly 2.5 kilometers across the Yangtze River. If you stood at one end and walked to the other, it would take you about 30 minutes. It stands 185 meters tall, roughly the height of a 60-story building, except instead of offices and windows, it is solid concrete all the way through. The steel used to build it was enough to construct 63 Eiffel Towers. Not one, 63. Building it meant doing something almost unimaginable at this scale. Engineers had to temporarily redirect the Yangtze River itself. They blasted diversion channels through the surrounding mountains, redirected one of the most powerful rivers on Earth through those tunnels, and then poured foundations onto the dry riverbed underneath. At the peak of construction, more than 26,000 workers were on site every single day. The main dam body took roughly 12 years to complete, and when the final generators came online, the structure reached a total power capacity of 22,500 megawatts, making it the most powerful hydroelectric dam on Earth. Nothing on this scale had ever been attempted before, and even today, almost nothing compares to it. But here is what most people never stop to think about. Before the dam could generate a single watt of electricity, before it could stop a single flood, the reservoir behind it had to fill with water. and that reservoir stretches nearly 600 kilometers upstream. And all of that land was not empty. More than 1,000 towns, villages, and settlements were directly in the path of the rising water. Ancient temples, stone bridges, neighborhoods whose streets had been walked for centuries. Many of them disappeared beneath the reservoir. The old town of Fengjie, with a history stretching back nearly 2,000 years, was abandoned and submerged beneath the rising waters. In total, more than 1,300 archaeological and cultural sites were lost or flooded. Photographers who documented the final days captured scenes that still feel surreal. Shops still full of goods, doors left open, streets that looked completely normal, except every single person had already gone. And those people, more than 1.3 million of them, did not choose to leave. They were required to relocate as the reservoir rose. Some were moved to cities hundreds of kilometers away, places they had never seen before. Farmers who had worked the same land for generations suddenly had no land at all. Many later complained they never received the compensation they had been promised. Some tried to return and found a lake where their homes used to be. It was the largest forced relocation ever caused by a dam project anywhere on Earth. Now, to understand why China built this at all, you have to look honestly at what the dam actually does, because the numbers are genuinely staggering. Since becoming fully operational, the Three Gorges Dam has generated well over 1.7 trillion kilowatt-hours of electricity. According to Chinese state estimates, that has prevented hundreds of millions of tons of coal from being burned, coal that would otherwise have added even more pollution to the air above Chinese cities. In 2020, the dam set a world record for electricity generation by a single power station, more than 111 billion kilowatt-hours in a single year. The flood control has mattered too. Since the dam opened, it has repeatedly helped reduce the impact of major floods along the Yangtze. Cities downstream that once faced devastating flood damage now have far greater protection than they did before. Navigation improved dramatically. Larger ships can now travel much farther inland, and trade through the region expanded with them. On paper, and to a large degree in reality, the dam achieved what it was built to achieve. The problem is what it cost to get there. When you fill a lake the size of a small country with water, the ground underneath notices. After the reservoir began filling, scientists recorded a noticeable increase in small earthquakes around the region. Researchers linked much of that activity to the immense weight of the water pressing down on rock and existing faults and fractures in the rock below. Not massive earthquakes, but the kind that crack walls, that shift hillsides, that remind people something enormous has changed above them. And those hillsides are moving. As the reservoir rises and falls with the seasons, water repeatedly soaks into the surrounding rock and soil, then drains back out again. Over time, that cycle weakens slopes from the inside. Landslides around the reservoir became common enough to alarm geologists, and entire hillsides have collapsed into the water in dramatic failures caught on video. And then there is the sediment, the mud, sand, and soil the river naturally carries downstream. The Yangtze River has always carried enormous amounts of sediment, the material that naturally rebuilds riverbanks, nourishes farmland, and helps support the massive delta downstream near cities like Shanghai. The dam now traps much of that sediment behind its walls. Billions of tons have accumulated inside the reservoir, while farther downstream, parts of the riverbed and delta have begun eroding because less sediment reaches them. Some scientists worry those long-term changes could eventually increase flood risks elsewhere along the river system. For millions of years, a unique species of dolphin called the baiji lived in the Yangtze River. Baiji, the Chinese river dolphin, pale and almost ghostly white against the dark river water, nearly blind. It navigated the muddy Yangtze by sending out clicks and listening for the echoes that came back, the same way bats navigate in the dark, by listening to echoes. Ancient Chinese poetry called it the goddess of the Yangtze. It survived ice ages, massive floods, thousands of years of human civilization along the river. It did not survive what humans did to the Yangtze in the 20th century. Pollution, heavy shipping traffic, overfishing, and massive engineering projects, including the Three Gorges Dam, devastated its habitat and fragmented the river system it depended on. In 2006, scientists spent 6 weeks searching the Yangtze for any remaining baiji. They did not find a single one. The baiji was declared functionally extinct, meaning so few remained that the species could no longer recover, becoming the first large aquatic mammal driven to extinction by human activity in modern history. It was not alone. The Chinese paddlefish, a giant freshwater fish that could grow up to 7 meters long, was officially declared extinct in 2022. Dams block the upstream journey it needed to reach its spawning grounds, pushing an already collapsing species past the point of recovery. The Yangtze River Basin is home to hundreds of fish species found nowhere else on Earth. Many are still endangered, and scientists are still debating how much of the damage can ever truly be undone. So here is the question that no single number can answer. Was it worth it? Millions of people downstream are safer from floods. Hundreds of millions have access to electricity powered in part by the river itself rather than coal. China's economy grew alongside the energy this dam helped provide. If you look at it purely in economic terms, many would argue more people benefited than suffered. But the baiji is gone forever. A species that survived for millions of years disappeared within a single human lifetime. 100,000 years from now, long after today's cities and governments are gone, it will still be extinct. That kind of loss does not fit neatly into a spreadsheet. More than 1 million people lost their homes, their land, and pieces of their history. Some were supported through the relocation. Many say they were not. Entire communities that had existed for generations disappeared beneath a reservoir, not because of a natural disaster, but because of a decision made by human beings. And the dam still sits in a geologically active region. Sediment still builds up year after year. Hillsides around the reservoir still shift and crack. China insists the structure is safe, and after decades of operation, it is still standing. But behind it sits nearly 39 trillion kilograms of water. And if a catastrophic failure ever happened, the consequences downstream would be almost unimaginable. It is the most powerful structure humans have ever built. It is also one of the most complicated. The story of the Three Gorges Dam is not a simple one. It is not a story about villains destroying nature for money, and it is not a story about heroes saving millions of lives. It is a story about what happens when human ambition goes all the way, brilliant and flawed at exactly the same moment. Engineers and political leaders looked at one of the greatest rivers on Earth and decided they could improve on it. We moved more than 1 million people, submerged entire towns and villages, and helped drive a species that had survived for millions of years toward extinction. And in return, we gained electricity for hundreds of millions of people, and protection from floods that once killed on a catastrophic scale. Whether that was worth it is a question China and the rest of the world will still be arguing over long after the dam has stopped operating. What we know for certain is this: nothing about the Three Gorges Dam was small. Not the ambition, not the achievement, not the cost, and not the consequences. That is what makes it one of the most extraordinary things human beings have ever built. If this is the kind of story you're here for, Titan Projects has more of them. Subscribe, and we will keep going.